In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB. Another exciting week for you as we've got some CFL news, some conspiracy theories, and we're going to go over the quarterback situation for your Toronto Argonauts. So JB, let's start it out with the MLSE conspiracy theories that seem to be coming out of the West. Maybe we can sort of talk about what the allegations are first and see if we can make any sense of this. But the first I heard of this was through Rod Peterson, who talked about the fact that MLSE is sort of calling the shots in the league. And he had a source claiming that they have no intention of playing. Further to that, we're behind the demise of the league last year, and in fact have ambitions to at some point own an NFL team and are actually trying to take the CFL down to some degree. Is that what you got from this series of conspiracy theories?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the way to put it. There seems to be a source that is telling Peterson that MLSE is in essence trying to control the CFL and at some point, I guess, then have it be put on the back shelf when an NFL franchise becomes available. That this is an attempt to take over the CFL before the NFL comes in. It's interesting. I mean, I'm certainly always up for a conspiracy. What did you think?
I just think it's too far. Like, there's not an NFL team available. They're not expanding right now. They're not looking to expand right now. And I know there have been links made between MLSE and Roger Goodell in the NFL, but I just think it's so far-fetched. Like, I don't think there's any doubt MLSE would rather own an NFL team than a CFL team, because an NFL team allows you to make millions and millions of dollars, and a CFL team does not. And so from a business standpoint, yeah, of course, I get that. But there's no indication to me that that is at all possible. And so what is this all about then? And then further to that, if they are trying to bury the league somehow or take control of it somehow, or if they're trying to make sure the league doesn't play, which some of the allegations have claimed, then why are they building what looks to be a fantastic team? Why bring in Pinball and Murphy and put together this roster that has got all of the Toronto area excited? It just doesn't make sense to me. None of that looks at all like an organization that is trying to bury a league or bury a team. So I'm very skeptical.
You would be hard-pressed to show an example in the last year of what Toronto has done to make you believe that they do not want a season. Now, if people are going to go so deep that they believe that this is the ultimate smokescreen and therefore they're able to come across looking like they're excited for a season because they have no intention of ever paying any of these salaries, yeah, I mean, I guess you could go down that road. That's a pretty deep rabbit hole.
That's so evil though, and it's so conspiring. I don't know. There's a whole different level to that. That sounds like a movie villain.
I don't see any reason why MLSE. I'll take some umbrage with the theory that MLSE is trying to control the CFL to allow the NFL. MLSE doesn't need to control the CFL. The NFL is Godzilla. If MLSE can land Godzilla, they don't need to control the CFL from the inside. That's as simple as that. I don't see any connection there. I don't see any reason for MLSE to try and sabotage the CFL so the NFL could move in easily. I don't think that theory holds any water at all. I don't think the NFL cares at all about the CFL or the CFL being in Toronto or competition or what have you. I don't think that's an issue.
From a competition standpoint, they certainly don't. I think they will say they do. I think in their position, I think they probably feel they have to say they do. And I think MLSE would certainly say that they care and they want to preserve what has been built here in the Toronto Argonauts and the CFL and everything else. But you're right in that the NFL has the power to pretty much do whatever.
Now, I do believe that there is an issue that they touch on there that that Peterson touches on, which is the idea of teams looking to not have the season. And that's something that we've talked about, on other pods. I think that's a reality, as, Arash, had in his tweet, he's talking about next week, they're going to make an announcement. CFL players have been asking for a timeline, for a schedule. It is not confidence inspiring when you get silence from your employer. Usually that means A, they don't have a plan, or B, they really don't want you to know it. And I think both of those are not great outcomes for the CFL. So, I do think, aside from the MLSE trying to destroy the CFL angle, I do think the issue of will there be a season, do teams want to have it, is a pretty primary one.
Yeah, and I guess they need it to be unanimous for them to decide to go ahead with the season because, again, from Peterson, his source had said that last year's vote had 6 teams in favor of playing and 3 against, and so they didn't play. And so this is clearly not a majority thing. I guess you need everybody on board because, well, I don't know. I don't even know what the legality would be of going ahead with the season with only 7 of your teams or what it ended up being. Who knows? But I would imagine that they are only going to go ahead if they have all 9 teams saying, yes, we're good to go ahead with our season. I think it's just too complicated if you're split in any way. Like, what do you do with the players? What do you do with those that are under contract with that team?
They're going to have a problem because they're once again going to the government looking for a loan. And nothing has changed. The government is definitely in no way more likely to give them money now than they were last year. If anything, last year might have been a better shot at it. So they're going to the government looking for the interest-free loans, and I don't see any chance of them getting them. And, that's going to have an impact because the government is not going to give them money to run a football league. And, if they want to use that as a reason for why they went to the XFL, well, I guess we'll see how that plays out. But the fact that they've gone to the government again and asked is not great. I mean, it just seems to me like what is the plan here? You've already been turned down. Why would your case be any stronger this year?
I don't even know if we're going to get that far. I don't even know if it's going to matter the loan or not. Like, I think if we can't have fans in the stands, then I'm not sure any of this is off the ground anyway. I think loans aside, money aside, if there aren't fans allowed in stadiums, then I don't think we're talking anyway. Maybe.
I think they really want that loan.
Oh, of course. An interest-free loan. I would also like an interest-free loan.
I think if they don't get it, I think they're just going to mothball it.
All right, well, on that cheerful note, let's move on to talk about our quarterback situation. This wraps up our positional groups on the offensive side of the ball. We've talked already about, we started out with the receiving core. We talked about running backs. Last week, we went into the offensive line. And we wrap up the offense this week by talking about the quarterback situation. And so we're mostly going to be talking about Nick Arbuckle, but we will get into the backup scenarios in a little bit as well. So let's talk about Arbuckle. There's reason for optimism. There's a reason for concern. And maybe we can kind of recap some of this because it's been a while since anyone's seen Nick Arbuckle play. But for those that maybe aren't up to speed on the entire situation, he was the backup in Calgary. Bo Levi Mitchell went down, and Nick Arbuckle came in and played an outstanding 7 games 7 games and a drive, or 2 drives, in relief of Bo Levi Mitchell. And then when Bo was healthy again, he came back and Arbuckle resumed his spot as the number 2. So in those 7 games, he amassed a 4-3 record, which doesn't sound that impressive, but his stats were better than that. It really should have been 5-2. The team lost a ridiculous game to Montreal, so that should have been a 5-2 record. But yeah, his numbers were amazing. Among other CFL quarterbacks, he had I believe it was the 8th best start to a CFL career through 7 games in the history of there being QB ratings. So yeah, that puts him in pretty elite company. But there are some concerns that come out of that. And I think the biggest concern is it's 7 games. So you as a coach, what does that mean to you that someone has a great 7 games? Does that automatically mean that we're looking at someone who's got a great career ahead of them?
I think that it's great. I mean, let me say that. I think that I don't want to be a wet blanket here. I think that you have 7 great games and your head coach is in essence willing to stake his first and maybe only coaching opportunity on you. I think those are all good signs. I think that it means he's able to play in the league. Lots of guys could not put together 7 good games. Many of them have worn Argo jerseys. So I think that we'll take 7 good games. Of course, moving forward, football is a game of adapting. So people have film. So oftentimes when you start as a rookie, sometimes you can flash hot because people don't have film on you and they don't have your tendencies down yet. And they get film and they spend the off season. So now will be the question: Does he have a different gear? Can he break his tendencies? Is he able to self-scout? That's really the question that's going to come up. Is he has the talent and that will get him there. For him to be excellent, he's going to have to be able to do some different things than he showed in those 7 games.
Yeah, and just to go over how that process works, it's a back and forth. So you have a quarterback that plays really well. Like you said, defensive coordinators spend a year sometimes scheming, trying to figure out, well, what can I do to beat this guy? And they come back with what they believe is the model to take that quarterback down. And it usually works. But now the question is, can that quarterback now adjust and present something else? And now suddenly there's a few things that we've got issues with as a defense. As a practical example to this, just looking at someone that we know and we're aware of, the first time that I, as a coach, the first time that I went up against Brendan Bridge, it was kind of interesting to watch because our defensive staff had an entire year of film on him, and he was a great quarterback. And they schemed specifically for all his strengths, and they did a fantastic job shutting him down. I think they held his team to 9 points, and we won the game. But Brendan Bridge, being an excellent quarterback, takes that information, looks at it, and then the next, I believe, 3 times we faced them, he was victorious, and we were unable to stop him. And I think that speaks to a player that is challenged, is stopped, but has something else that they can turn to. They're not just a one-trick pony. They've studied, they've learned, they've found, okay, well, these are my weaknesses, so maybe I can adjust this way. Maybe I can add this to my game. Maybe I can do this instead. And then now the defense doesn't know what they have to stop. And I think that's the question here with Nick Arbuckle, obviously at a higher level now, but when defenses stop the things he did well in Calgary, can he show us something else?
Yeah. Are his tendencies, or are they weakness hiding flaws? If he likes to throw a particular pass, is that because he can't throw the other one, or is it just because he likes it? And I think that's an important fact to find out, because if your tendencies are there because you can't do the other thing, that's when players flame out, and there isn't anything there because they can only do the one thing. They don't throw to the right because they can't throw to the right.
Let's take a look at some of the concerns that people have expressed over the last 17 months since we played CFL football. So one of the big criticisms that I've seen of Arbuckle is that the receivers he played with produced so much yak, so many yards after the catch, that they boosted his stats, that his yardage stats were very misleading because this was receivers doing the work for him. He would connect on a short pass and the receiver would take it to the house. My counter to that, and especially in watching the film on this, it's not like the receivers are doing it on their own. It's not like he's just throwing a ball in the air, a receiver's catching it and then making four guys miss and get to the end zone. He's finding guys in open space. He's finding guys that have beat their one-on-one matchup. He's finding mismatches. He's throwing to people accurately and allowing them the time and the space to be able to make a move or to be able to get some more yards out of it after the catch. So yeah, his yak yards are very high, but of course it's a two-way street. They're high because the receivers made great plays, certainly, but they're also high because he as the quarterback put them in a position to get yards after the catch. So that one, I can dismiss that immediately. The other one that I was a little bit more concerned about until I started looking at some of the film was the criticism that 2/3 of his passes were under 10 yards. And he really struggled in that 10 to 20 yard range. His numbers are actually quite poor in that 10 to 20 yard window. They're good beyond that. Not that many attempts, but they're good beyond that. And most of his attempts are at the line of scrimmage or just beyond the line of scrimmage. What do you make of numbers like that when you see stats of a quarterback really throwing short for the most part and struggling in those medium range passes?
Those were worrying. I mean, I think the two red flags that jumped out at me when they did some analysis was his tendency to throw to one side of the field and his tendency to throw short passes. Look, you can be a great quarterback and short pass people down the field. I don't think that necessarily eliminates you, but the thing is, you have to be great if you're going to do that. It just the level of processing speed and accuracy is so much higher if you're going to be that style of quarterback. So it's not impossible to be a guy to matriculate your way down the field, but it is so much harder to do. So it is worrying because most quarterbacks cannot maintain the accuracy or the processing speed to constantly pick on a defense that's sitting on underneath passing. It's very hard to do.
I agree, and I think we're going to have to keep an eye on that. I think we're going to see very early in the season what exactly this means, because I think defenses are going to key on that. They're going to start playing in combinations that make it very difficult for him to throw short, and we'll see how he adjusts. See, when I see him struggle in that 10 to 20 yard range and throw a lot of short passes, what the film tells me is that he's making the throws that he should make. He's making the correct reads, but almost sort of by the book. It's hard for me to explain that clearly, but on any given play. So for example, if let's say he's got a smash concept, let's say he's got a corner route on the inside and a hook route on the outside, that's what he's looking at. If the defense runs cover 3 hold, then he's always going to throw the hook, because technically that's the right throw to make. If he's got a back on a backer on covering a running back and his running back's got a wheel route, well, guess where he's going? He's going to go to the wheel route, because technically that's the right read to make. I feel like most of the time the correct read is the read he makes, but that doesn't often involve going downfield a lot, because what defenses are going to give up are the shorter routes. They're going to give up the hooks. They're going to give up the quicks. They're going to give up the swing routes. And so that's what he's taking. He's taking what the defense is giving him, and that's the correct thing. And I also think about him being sent out there to quarterback for Calgary in 2019. He's not being asked to do the same things that Bo Levi Mitchell is being asked to do, because of course he's not. He's a newer quarterback. He's inexperienced. And so what they want him to do is take the easy completions, move the ball down the field, chew up time. Of course, those are good things. That's part of the strategy. But when he's pressed, when he catches teams in zero or cover one, now he'll take his shot. And he did take a number of shots downfield. The other thing that, and I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, because this does sort of speak to a tendency. When I started looking at some of his Georgia State stuff, you see the same kinds of things. He loved throwing to backs. He loved throwing to receivers on drag routes, all of that short stuff, whether it's over the middle on the sidelines, anything under 10 yards. He loved that too. But he would occasionally, in the same way, go deep. He had a running back / receiver named Penny Hart, who's now with the Seahawks. And the two of them just tore it up together. And you see him lock in on Penny Hart the same way that he locked in on Reggie Begelton in 2019, where you've got this star, you've got this terrific receiver. It's tempting for an inexperienced quarterback to lock in on a guy like that, and it's not necessarily wrong if he's open and he's making the catches. And Begelton's stats were incredible during Arbuckle's run of 7+ games. So I don't really see anything wrong with that. But the question will be, what happens when teams take away whoever his Reggie Begelton is going to be in Toronto? What happens now if you're able to take that guy away? Can you start spreading the ball around to other receivers? When they take the flat routes away, can you now connect on those medium routes?
Can he keep his eyes downfield? I think the absolute death of a young quarterback is the moment you see a young quarterback become captain checkdown, it's over. There's no undoing it. That you have got to keep your eyes downfield and you have got to be looking for 10, 15-yard passes, because if you're checking down to your back, that is not sustainable. That is not going to win football games. That is going to make you a 10-year backup.
And he does, but it's one of the things I think he does really well, though, like the sight adjustments. I think he's great at. They maybe get a little bit predictable as he got later into the season, because anytime there's a blitz, he's immediately looking either for hots or sight adjustments. But he always finds them and he makes the correct read. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, unless you're really backed up and it's second and 20.
It's fine on a blitz.
But that's largely what he's doing. Like he's finding, and that was another thing that was interesting too. So many teams, and this also goes back to Georgia State, they love sending heat, and I actually think he deals with blitzes very well. So that was one that confused me, because I actually think he's great in man coverage, but I also think he's wonderful under those 3-man rush situations. He had some amazing throws in 2019 where teams would rush 3. He'd sit back there comfortably and just throw a beautiful corner route, or find a guy in a ton of space who'd come deep across the middle. And it's got to be something in between there. I think where teams maybe found some success against Arbuckle was less so in the all-out blitzes, more in the sort of zone blitz style, where he had to take a second to calculate, where the sight adjustment or the hot wasn't necessarily there right away. And that's where he started to move around a little bit. Now he seemed to still keep his eyes downfield, but now under pressure, those short routes taken away, those hots taken away, he had a lot less success. So I think we'll probably see the season start with a lot of that, with teams throwing some unconventional blitzes, not all outs and not a lot of cover zero, because he's shown that he can handle that, and certainly not those 3-man rushes. So anything between, and let's see how he does with that when he has to hit those 15-yard digs and really read the middle of the field.
That's what I want to see. I want to see pressure comes, he rolls out, and he hits a 15-yard dig. And if he does that, then we know we're onto something. And if he doesn't, then that's a problem.
It could be. And those are the toughest passes to make, those mid-range things.
Right.
Hitting somebody deep on a fly route or a corner route, it's not the same as trying to hit somebody right as they come out of their break, or in this narrow space between two zones in that seam. Those aren't easy passes to make. And so the fact that he struggled on those, that's natural for a younger quarterback.
Yeah. but it is also like those are the passes that differentiate between the elite and Macbeth.
That's not the opposite of elite. I would like to throw a flag on that. That is not the opposite of elite. Macbeth, who led the CFL in touchdown passes in 2019. Let's end this on a positive note for Arbuckle. A couple things that he does really well that I'm excited about seeing. I think he's awesome at finding matchup issues. He's really good. Pre-snap, he'll see who's lined up on who, and if it's man, he always makes the right call. And that's, again, why we see so many throws to running backs, because so often the offense has managed to isolate a running back on a slower linebacker, and that's an easy throw and catch for him. But he's also good at finding his receivers in mismatches, finding his receivers matched up against people that just don't handle their skill set well. In the case of Breskison against Toronto, that game against Toronto in 2019 where he made us look foolish, he kept finding Breskison matched up against shorter DBs and threw him balls that he could go up and get. And so that's something I'm excited about. We've got such exciting tools in Toronto for him to use. Those receivers that he's got, some big, tall targets. He's got that familiarity with Eric Rodgers, with Breskison already, with DeVaris Daniels, even though Daniels wasn't on the Stampeders in 2019. He had played with him. He had taken reps with him in the previous years on Calgary. So he's pretty familiar with these guys. I'm excited to see him find those great matchups and let them go do their thing.
Well, he's going to get lots of opportunity. As I mentioned, the head coach's career is tied to him. He was basically brought here, and he's like, I'm bringing my guy. And I know there was a bit of a circuitous route to it, but he's his guy. So he'll have every opportunity to make this happen, which is a good thing. I think we don't have to worry about the politics of it. I think coach is going to give him every chance to be the guy that he brought with him to start his coaching career.
Let's talk about the backup position, because I think this is it's clear that Arbuckle is going to be the starting quarterback. No matter what happens between now and opening day, Arbuckle is going to be the starting quarterback, if not only for the reasons you just named, but I think based on resume and everything else as well. The backup job is a really interesting one to me. We've got Antonio Pipkin, who we saw play a little bit with Montreal. Kelly Bryant, who's coming in from a really interesting college career playing at Mizzou and Clemson before that. And then Nick Tiano, who is relatively unknown, coming to us from Chattanooga. What do you make of this backup battle?
It's an interesting question, because what do you do? What do you do as a coach? Do you want, there's two schools of thought. Do you want a quarterback who plays in the same system and basically has the same skill sets relative? So if your quarterback goes down, the transition is relatively easy. Or do you want a backup who is a curveball, who complements your starter, who does things that your starter can't, and that maybe opens up the playbook for you? I think that's the question put to the Argos. If you want Tiano, he's probably going to be closer to what Arbuckle is. If you go the opposite direction, maybe you want a mobile quarterback. Maybe you want somebody who could come in and run a more aggressive running offense for you.
I think Tiano's really exciting. I love watching his stuff at Chattanooga. He looks very Arbuckle-ish. The problem with him is he's not going to be ready this year. He's going to need time. He reminds me, when I watch Tiano, it reminds me of, and I've seen this movie before, and it's so frustrating, all the guys that got stuck behind Ricky Ray, who have turned now into outstanding quarterbacks for other teams. Cody Fajardo, Trevor Harris, Zach Collaros, all these guys that needed time. They came into the league and they just weren't ready. They needed time to sit and watch and learn and understand this game. It's so hard for a quarterback who's only played in an American system, as all these guys have. Coming to the CFL, it's so rare that you can just make it work right away, because it is extremely different. And so those guys sat on the bench behind Ray, and they took their time. But unfortunately, by the time their contracts had expired in Toronto and they were ready to now move on to become great players, other teams were also aware of them, and they got their opportunities somewhere else. And that's what I see with Nick Tiano. He won't be ready this year. He's just not going to be ready to play CFL ball this year. I love how he breaks down an offense to a detriment. Sometimes you see him take sacks because you can see him trying to figure out what he's looking at downfield. He loves looking at his third and fourth read, which you don't see a lot of young quarterbacks do. But a guy playing like that in an entirely new system, he can't make his fourth and fifth read in the CFL and still be on his feet by the time he makes it. He's just going to need some adjusting time. And so a couple of years from now, I think Nick Tiano might be an excellent quarterback. He may go the route that I still foresee for Dakota Prukop, who's out in Calgary now. I think he's another one of these guys that could be like Fajardo, Harris, and Caleros. And Nick Tiano's yet another one. So if we're looking at someone for this year, Tiano's probably a practice squad guy in my eyes. If you need to win this year, you've got to take Pipkin probably over Bryant just for the experience factor, for being in the league for a few years. I think Bryant is a slightly more exciting player, and I think there's maybe more upside there. Pipkin's got that great deep ball. He struggles with accuracy in the shorter game. Bryant is almost the opposite. He struggles as the passes get further down the field, but his short stuff's great. He's got that mobility, the sort of electric playmaking ability that he has. But I think Pipkin, just having spent time in the CFL, knowing how to make those reads, I think he throws on the run a little bit better too. And so I think if it's a battle between those two guys, which I think it is for this year's backup, I think Pipkin probably gets the job, even though he's maybe doesn't have as high a ceiling as Kelly Bryant does. I think if we're playing for this season, it's Antonio Pipkin.
I'd love to see Bryant take the backup job. I would love to see. I know some people don't like the quarterback coming off the field, new quarterback going on, but it can be done. It can be done properly, and I don't know why you wouldn't. Honestly, I don't know why it shouldn't be normalized. That, look, we have, you have different running backs, you have different receivers, that if you have a quarterback who can do more, I think there's a way to do that, to bring on, Bryant and really force the defense to adapt to a totally different set of play calls, and to kind of keep them off balance. It's not easy to do. Certainly we've seen lots of examples of teams not being able to do it, and doing it poorly. But I don't think it can't be done. I think you can create a 2 quarterback offense. That's me. I would be excited to keep Bryant and to really try something radical.
I just think you're going to end up in that same scenario that I was talking about with Tiano, where Bryant is a rookie too. He hasn't played in this league, and much like Tiano, he's going to get out there and these guys just won't know what they're looking at yet. They need more time. You need game experience. You need practice experience. You need to spend at least a year taking that stuff in. And I think that unless you're really going to narrow down that playbook, and that's kind of what you're talking about, I think. So you're talking about a package where, maybe there were only this number of plays, and that's something that I could see happening. But I don't think Kelly Bryant or Nick Tiano, for that matter, are ever going to be in a position this season where if Nick Arbuckle went down, those guys could get out there and through the course of an entire football game, win it for you. I think, maybe with a smaller complement of plays, maybe with fewer responsibilities, maybe with some simple one read plays, that's something that could happen. But you can't win like that. You can't win a whole football game like that.
No, you're right. I mean, I think that that in the end, Pipkin is he's the logical choice.
He's exciting too. I love that deep ball, and we got some guys that can go and get it. Like he's got that. I don't know if he styled himself after Vernon Adams, but it's that same kind of Well, that wouldn't really make sense to me. I think that's just how, because you watch him at Tiffin too, and he's still got that same style where he throws so beautifully on the run, and he just launches these moon balls, these Jeff Blake style rainbows that just seem to come down right in his receiver's hands. If he can shore up some of that short game stuff, there's potential for him. But yeah, he's an exciting player. I wouldn't be. I think Arbuckle's better. I don't think there's much question about that. But I wouldn't be nervous if Pipkin had to go in for a couple of games. Whereas if Bryant or Tiano does, I think we're in trouble.
You're right. I think that will be the choice. I think that makes the most sense.
But at the same time, I don't want to lose Bryant or Tiano because you can see their skills. Like, they're gonna go on to do something. And I'm so tired of it being with someone else. I'm tired of looking around the league and all the quarterbacks used to be a backup for the Toronto Argonauts. Like, we can't have that happen again.
No, but I guess you just got to keep the extra guy and pull the trigger if you see it.
Yeah, and I don't know if they can keep 4. I think it's just you can. That they had 4 on the roster in 2019 when we went out there. The recently retired James Franklin was the plan, and McLeod Bethel Thompson was the backup, and then you had Prukop and O'Connor battling it out, largely practice squads, sometimes dressing. And maybe it's a 4 quarterback look that they're going to go with again this year, but. I think if there's any real time going to anyone, like we've both agreed, I think now Antonio Pipkin's probably going to be the guy. So pencil him in as our backup quarterback, and Tiano and Bryant battled it out for the number 3 spot. And I think Bryant wins that number 3 spot. I think Bryant will be more immediately better. I think the ceiling on Tiano is exciting, although I think Bryant's ceiling is pretty exciting too. So that they both are going to be interesting guys to watch, but I think Kelly Bryant will look better sooner. I think Nick Tiano's ceiling is just as high, if not higher, but I think it's going to take him more time. I think the stuff that Tiano does well takes longer to develop. And so for this year, I think you'll see Arbuckle, followed by Pipkin, followed by Bryant. Tiano is going to be on the practice squad, but keep an eye on him. Well, that will do it for us on the X's and Argos podcast. As always, please don't forget to subscribe, to rate, to tell everyone you know about us. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.